Don't all clam up now just because we started the recording.
So just welcome to the Non-Duality Living Cafe, friends. Our guest is John Astin, and we've been chatting for a half an hour, and we'll just continue in some direction. Um, I would like to encourage any of you to make a comment. Certainly raise your questions. Go for your deepest doubts if that's where you need some clarity. This is an opportunity um, to share and to deepen and widen and dredge out our understanding. Um, so with that, Philo, maybe you had some comment.
No, no, let's get going with John.
Okay. Thank you. John, thank you for coming. We appreciate it very much.
Well, thanks for the invitation, James and Philo. Appreciate it. It's nice to be here. Hello to some of the folks I know from my meetings. Welcome, and others who I don't know. Hello. It's nice to meet you all. Um, well, needless to say, we have a lot of ideas about reality, don't we? Just our everyday notions of things, what we think things are, how we think different things are related to other things. The whole world of language and conceiving is just deeply embedded in our day-to-day experience as human beings, right? And of course, there's also in human existence all these different frames of reference and different ways that human beings have attempted to map the territory of the human experience, and whether those are philosophical maps or scientific maps, religious, spiritual maps, psychological maps. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on, doesn't it? In terms of all the ways that we as humans have attempted to make sense of this, right? Conceptually, put it into some kind of frame of reference of understanding. This is what it is. This is how it works. This is how this is related to that. This is how I fit into this, or how I don't fit into it, or how I can best navigate all of this complexity. And for the most part, we take for granted that in one way or another, some of these frames of reference are true, and we kind of live our lives as if they're true. And in one sense, I often say that all of the frames of reference are true within their frame of reference, right? Like within the frame of reference of kind of consensus understanding, we're gathered together in a Zoom call discussing the nature of reality, exploring the nature of reality together. And that's a frame of reference, is a way of taking this that's here and collapsing it into an idea, right? I would say in one very real sense, the essence of my work is opening up another perspective, one that is largely not very well known, one that most humans have never really been introduced to, even though, strangely enough, we are feeling this other perspective all the time. It's just that our ideas about things are seemingly so powerful. They have sort of such a grip on our sense of what's happening here that we often just completely overlook something that's staring us in the face about the nature of our experience, that that opens up a completely different vantage point on what's happening here. So I want to just share a few really simple simple things about what's being experienced and invite you into exploring that and tasting and touching and experiencing that for yourself. And by the way, everything that I'm going to talk about today, and even as we open up and have discussion with one another, the place to really make any possible sense of anything I might be sharing is in your own experience. I mean, you can certainly try to understand what I'm saying conceptually, because that's natural to do, but I really invite you to look in your own experience to see if anything that I'm saying resonates or makes sense at all. So here we are. Here is this, call it the moment, this that's present in all its seeming complexity and diversity and elaboration, all the different stuff that seems to be happening. A lot of which we have names for, you know, describing thoughts, feelings, sensations, physical objects we think we're observing, ourselves, the body, you know, and on, right? And then many things that are being encountered that if we look for a moment, we can see that they can't easily be grasped with language. We don't really have words for these little subtle, nuanced, you know, movements of energy, and we really don't have any words at all for them. But if you just feel for a moment the presence of your experience, which is kind of a silly thing to say because that's all you're ever feeling is your experience. But if you just feel right now, I'm just going to point to something that's so obvious but underappreciated, which is this moment is alive, isn't it? It's not holding still. It's not static. It's not fixed. Just feel that. Feel the absolute fluidity of what's occurring. Even all the different ways you might characterize what's occurring, again, as thoughts or feelings or sensations, perceptions. Feel any of those. Feel anything that's happening. And notice its dynamism, its absolute non-static nature. It's impossible to hit a pause button to keep this from moving, right? Feel that. Feel how alive everything is. It's obvious. It's so obvious that it doesn't hold still, that it's not fixed in one particular way. It's a constant flow, isn't it? A constant unfolding. We talk about there being these discrete kind of bounded moments. We even have a word for it, you know, or the present moment, the now, as if it's a thing that you could encapsulate. You know, you could hold on to the moment somehow, with, as if you could hold on to it with your hands or hold on to it with your mind or your consciousness. But notice that what you call the moment is just constantly slipping away, isn't it? You feel that? How ungraspable the moment actually is as a thing. Feel your experience and ask yourself this question: exactly how long is what you call the moment here for? Can you identify what the moment is? Can you actually describe it? Can you think about the moment, what it is? Is it here long enough to be thought about? Is it here long enough to be conceived? Long enough to be pinpointed and identified? Oh, there is the moment. This is what the moment is. Can't be done. There's a term in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of phenomena of experience liberating itself in the moment of its arising. They say everything self-liberates upon arising. Liberates in the sense of, here's this perception, you could say, the perception of the moment. And the perception is, you feel how it's vanishing as it appears. Just gone. What's so interesting is that this disappearance of what we call now, just absolute immediate disappearance, just gone. We think, well, how is there anything ever seemingly here? Because we're out here we are, like, here's the moment. So this very paradoxical sense of something here, and yet what's here cannot be grasped as a thing because it's so dynamic. It's paradoxically always here. There's always a sense of being, a sense of presence. We could use these different words, a sense of something is here, palpably present, concretely present, alive, vital, palpable, right? It's here. It's life, aliveness. But if you were to try to grab hold of it and say what it actually is and put it in some frame of reference, some box, you could not do it because it eludes capture, doesn't it? Because it's in a process, feel this, of becoming something else. As it's becoming something else, becoming something else. It never lands anywhere, does it? Not really. It's funny, because we have these notions as humans, wanting to get better. I was just having an email conversation with someone who contacted me about letting go, and they're finding it so hard to let go of certain things. And I invited them to just notice how we could talk about letting go of things that we don't want to hold on to in a human kind of personal context as something that we could practice and get better at letting go, right? And I said, but just look at life itself. Life itself is the great master. Reality is the great master of letting go, isn't it? Everything is let go instantaneously. Not because I'm doing something to get better at letting go, but because we can't stop the letting go. We are helpless to hold on. There's no holding on to the moment. Try to hold on to the moment right now. There's no holding on. There's no holding on to anything. It's just the nature of what's alive. I've done a couple of meditations, using different kind of images to illustrate this dynamism and the impossibility of defining the moment, of pinning it down conceptually. And one of the images that's coming to me now is of a fire that's burning. You've got a fire like at a campfire or a fire in your fireplace, and it's mesmerizing, isn't it, to watch the fire burning? It's constant movement, isn't it? And if you were to try to describe what is the way the fire is, you couldn't do it, could you? Because a fire is not one way. This is exactly what our experience is like. Our experience is not a particular way that could, because it is alive like the fire. It's constant, its shape. It never really becomes a shape, actually. What is the shape of this moment? Well, it's just become a new shape, hasn't it? Faster than we could possibly, try to render it as being this way. It becomes another way, and becomes another way, and becomes another way, endlessly. This is the flow that we're experiencing right now, this ceaseless flow. And from this perspective, and you could just consider it a perspective. I mean, from one perspective, no, the world is definable, and there's things that I can define, human experiences I can define and talk to you about, and you can talk to me about your experiences and the circumstances of your life. I mean, this is a valid perspective, right? within that frame of things being definable. But from this other vantage that I'm just sharing with you and inviting you into, there actually are no things. This never becomes something. We could say it's in a process of constant becoming, constant blooming, but it never becomes a fixed bloom. Because why? Because it's like the fire, it's alive, it's dynamic. And this is the antithesis of philosophy, what I'm saying. This is exactly the felt sense of the moment, empirical. It's palpably present as our experience right now. And seeing this is liberating, because there's no things that we are bound up in. There's nothing to be, there's no cage that we are trapped in. There's no knots, there's no things, because of the self-release of the moment. That's its freedom. Freedom in each perception, absolute freedom. Nothing to resolve, nothing to fix, nothing to get beyond, nothing to disidentify from. Again, because there's not things. Despite what our conceiving mind keeps sort of suggesting very strongly, that, oh no, this world is definable.
Even that very mind, that very thought is exactly what you are describing. It's not a thing. It's transient, as transient as everything else here.
And somehow this no thingness, this absence of thingness, because everything is alive, it shows up as the stuff of the world. It shows up, that's its display. It displays as phenomena, both subjective phenomena and the material world, what we think of as the material world. It shows up as stuff. That's the Buddhists would say that this empty, identityless reality looks like stuff and is experienced as the stuff of our lives. Here it is, a bunch of human beings who've come together on a Zoom call, right? This is the stuff that this no thingness looks like and can be experienced as. It's very paradoxical.
Can we also call it the heart? The living, felt heart, heartness, hearting?
I mean, we could call it anything, of course. Is there a particular reason you're suggesting calling it that?
Well, we hear certain words over and over again, and I'm just wondering, is there a word that reduces the likelihood of further words in favor of something closer to right now, feeling, knowing, without thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my own experience, both personally and in work with others, at different times, different words can be evocative of exactly what, you're suggesting, the discovery of, you could say, that which transcends all the concepts, interestingly, without having to negate them, without having to do anything about them. It's very interesting. Like a word like heart, in some ways I could make an argument that's a very loaded word. Actually, it means a lot of things. People have a lot of associations of heart with kind of emotions, and this is so beyond emotions. And I'm not suggesting you meant that by the word heart.
Well, this is my point. It gives us the opportunity to self-liberate our tendency toward wording, when right now, this instant, wordless, selfless is. And wording can point, but is, and we're it now.
Indeed.
I
Yeah.
wonder, I wonder sometimes if wording takes us away from now in a way that it doesn't have to. I don't know.
I mean, certainly it could, that's always possible. When the words can become yet another thing that people are um, orienting to and believing to be true and getting caught up in the language, and all of that can certainly happen. Um, we're worded creatures as well, and when we gather together in environments like this, we're often using words as part of the exploration. And I'm certainly attempting to use the words in a way to, point beyond the words, whether that I'm successful at that or not, sometimes maybe so, other times maybe not. But yeah, and I think the other thing that I think is important, and I feel this way whenever I'm sharing and teaching, is to try to clarify, you know, even though the words are impossible ultimately, because this can't be squeezed into a word, needless to say, it's helpful to clarify what we mean when we're using certain words. I think that's really important. Um, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned the word is, I do find myself often drawn to finding and using words that um, are less loaded, that people tend to have fewer associations with. That's why I mentioned what I did about heart, even though it's a beautiful word. I think of heart as what the center of something is, the heart of it, the center of reality, the center of this moment. Of course,
Art is me now independent of everything, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. What would you
You
say?
talk about, you
Yeah.
said earlier, let's look at the experience. What's our experiencing right now?
Sure. There's nothing else to look at. Yeah.
So there's a feeling, knowing that goes with that. And when awareness
Yes.
itself is self-liberating, spontaneously
Mm-hmm.
flowing that way,
Mm-hmm.
the feeling is even stronger, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it?
Yeah, I
And
mean, one of the ways I put it is that like what I was pointing to, this constant dynamism, this constant like flow that never stops, that's impossible to pin down because of its dynamic nature. That's always going on, but we're often attending to what we think is going on, which suggests enduring nature to things, a kind of stasis, even that we have in language, we have nouns, suggesting there's things, right? So I'm essentially kind of just playing with this other perspective and reorienting attention to this other way of, you could say, experiencing this, which is recognizing, wow, this is not holding still, has no enduring nature. And then we get to appreciate that perspective, which has a very different feel to it. It has a very different sense to it. It has one of this constant fluidity, this, the sense of being unbounded and untethered and not caught in anything, nor anyone caught, right? Because of that dynamic nature of everything. Yeah.
I think it's important to see that the words are also self-liberating, and that we tend to hang on to words, maybe because we can write them down and then go back to them. But in the actual experiencing of words, they're self-liberating. We don't have to be hanging on to these words, and we're not actually hanging on, other than with our memories, which then develop into beliefs and things like that. But to live in a world where everything is self-liberating, including all of that, all of the things you're thinking and feeling about it, that's where the freedom is, to see that. It's not that you have to do anything about it because it's already happening.
Yeah, it's really more seeing. Exactly.
It's also important, I think.
Hello, John, can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah, in just a second, Tony, James was about to say
Oh,
something. Yeah.
oh,
yeah.
sorry. Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
that's okay.
And just by the way, I would encourage anyone to keep their unmute on, and like that is, you can just speak when you feel the moment is right, without raising your hand and us all kind of refocusing and rejigging this. We're sitting in one room and we're talking. So let's try to be as open and free and roaming about the cabin as we can be. And I had a comment, but it's gone, consistent with what John is talking about. Tony, please.
Okay, I'll jump in. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, John, very much enjoyed your talk. Very eloquent description of your experience, of your state. I knew you were going to give this talk, so I actually went to your YouTube channel 2 or 3 days ago and just looked at some of your videos, just really dipped in and out. And you're essentially saying the same thing, which is, of course, is not surprising because there is just, this.
I've been accused of being a broken record, yes.
Yes, but you've said the same thing in many different ways, and each way that I saw you saying this thing we'll call it, was sort of fresh and spontaneous and quite sort of lively. But I want to ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
When I listened to your talk just now, and when I saw some of your videos, what I saw could be categorized as description. Description. What I didn't see was prescription. What I mean is this: if someone comes to your YouTube channel, it's quite reasonable to assume that they identify themselves as a seeker.
Mm-hmm.
And as a seeker, they may have this view that they're in a state of ignorance, they're suffering, and they look at you and they listen to you describe your state, describe your experience. I know some people don't like the word state, but I mean, we're constrained by language, but
Mm-hmm.
nevertheless, what you're doing is describing your experience. So what I wanted to ask you this seeker who's looking at your videos,
Mm-hmm.
it's quite reasonable to think that they're going to say, this is fantastic. I mean, John he's in this wonderful state. I don't know, shall I call it enlightenment or whatever you want to call it? He's in this state and I'm not in this state. I'm suffering. I'm in the state of ignorance. I would like to be in the same state as John. Would be a reasonable thing to assume that they might ask or go through their minds. And also together with that, they'll think, well, what do I have to do to get into the same state as John?
Mm-hmm.
So what I saw was a lot of description about your experience, but I didn't see a prescription for the would-be seeker who's looking at you and wanting to find something that that they imagine they should have based on what they see you say. So I'm just really interested in your reaction to that.
It's interesting. It's interesting that you heard it that way. My own sense of what I do typically, including what happened this morning at the outset of our being together, was, I mean, I guess you could say I was describing my experience, but it really was absolutely an invitation to the listener. Forget it, who gives a shit about my experience? It's irrelevant. The only thing you can look at is your experience. And the invitation was pretty explicitly clear to look at your experience, to feel your experience, to notice its nature, to notice its dynamism, to notice its ungraspable, ever-changing, ever-morphing, sort of liquefying, self-releasing nature. That was really the whole intention. It was
Yes,
not
I understand.
really
I understand that there's an invitation there, and there are also a lot of what you could call pointers as well. But nevertheless, if someone watches you and listens to you, they're going to relate to you as an individual who is having a particular experience, and nothing wrong with that. And they're going to wonder, how can I attain that state? I think that's quite reasonable. And I don't know if you address that or not, or maybe you do. Maybe, as you say, it's the way I'm looking at it. Certainly in what you're saying, there is description mixed in with pointers towards this, the unchanging awareness that is really our true nature. They're certainly mixed in, but...
By the way, I actually never said those words, but...
No, they're my words.
Anything about an unchanging awareness, but
no, okay. Well, they're my words, but there's no. I mean, look, the side of the fence that I sit on is very much pro-practice, and that's my experience. That's my experience. So I very much believe in practice. And when you talk about such concepts, I mean, I call them concepts because anything you say when you're using language is a concept. I mean, there's no getting away from
getting
that.
around that one.
It may have it may have a reality behind it, but when you communicate it to another, it's a concept. So, when you talk about being and the dynamic nature of, consciousness, you use the word dynamic, which it certainly is. It's both silent and dynamic simultaneously. But when you talk in those terms, me, from a pro-practice background, wants to say, so there are some specific practices here that we can talk about, whether we're talking about something like self-inquiry that Ramana Maharshi advocated, or and a whole sort of number of practices. Do you ever talk about that, or is that or do you think that
it's interesting because, again, it could just be we cannot help in one sense but to hear whatever is being spoken through our particular frames of reference. That's a tricky thing about being human. But you just said, you're coming from the side of the importance of practice. I would just maybe offer up a possibility that there are many ways to define what we mean by practice, and I am definitely not of the persuasion of saying that there's nothing you can do to realize this, as is sometimes said. In other words, just that sort of somehow reinforces an illusion of doership. Or, in fact, I'm very explicit, as I was at the beginning of our meeting here, about actually doing something, of actually looking and actually inquiring into the nature of what's here, and not assuming that we know what it is, but actually looking and feeling into experience to discover in the case of what I was focused on, I would say maybe the most profound way that our actual experience deviates from what we conventionally think about it. And that is central. I mean, you talk about practice. I don't know what traditions you've come out of, but it's an interesting thing. I don't necessarily want to get into sort of debates, not that they can even be resolved, about how much or what type of practices are required to see what I'm talking about, because that has been debated for thousands of years.
Well, there's only one practice. Well, there's only one practice essentially, which is to go back to silence. But okay, there are many.
Well, that's a perspective, right? That's a perspective. Maybe it's true for some, but maybe not true for all, right? And so I kind of hold it in a pretty open-ended way in terms of, and then I take my best crack at it in terms of what I think will be most direct and most potentially beneficial as far as opening up an experiential understanding of what I'm talking about. But, I think it's interesting, that like something like in a Buddhist context, I was talking essentially about impermanence and emptiness and the discovery of that. And, as somebody who meditated myself in different traditions for a couple of decades, like a crazy person, you know, hours and hours every day.
Mhm.
I don't think it takes 20 years sitting on a meditation cushion to actually look and see at the moment. What we call the moment is actually here for no time. Just look and see. I think the key is
Yeah.
to, when you look and see, can you let the implications of that settle into your being? And
Yeah,
that I
no,
think is what's challenging for humans often.
but it's what sticks. Oh, I did 40. You did 20, I did 40. But it's a case of what sticks, because there's a big difference between getting a glimpse
Sure.
into this unbounded nature and for it to stick.
Sure. We
You know, I
have
mean,
we have
or to
deep-seated.
become a living reality. I put
Absolutely.
a
That's part of
I
the,
put
that's
up a
part of the,
post.
what's that?
I put up a post in the group a few days ago saying, forget about seeking the truth, blah blah. Anyway, it's
Oh,
there on
you're
the
that guy. Okay. I
I'm
got
that guy. Yeah, I'm
that
that
piece of
guy.
my mind. All right.
Yeah, I'm that guy. And I said, well, forget about searching for the truth. Forget about trying to see through delusions. Forget about searching for some imaginary idea of what the truth is. Just go back to silence. Just go back to stillness. That's all you require to be free from the bondage of action, which is what I wrote. So I got a few replies. So that's very much where I'm coming from.
Mhm.
Anyway,
There
I
are a
don't want to
few.
get I don't want to get into that. Steal the limelight from John, because this is his
Okay.
this is his gig. Oh no, we're in a cafe. I forgot. Actually, this is the first time I've been to this cafe, so I just
Welcome.
need to.
Tony,
Yeah,
there are some caveats to, I think, as
you
John
sent
was
me a
saying.
you sent me a Facebook message an hour ago.
Yeah, let's forget about that for a second. Let that self-liberate for a minute. We're here now. There are some caveats to this idea of practice. Like ideally, with any practice, the practice falls away at some point, right? But what can happen is that the practice becomes the lifestyle. And so you might get the meditation for 40 years. And that's really not the point. The point is to look into the experience that you're having, to see how ephemeral it is, and then to let understanding fall out of that. For one thing, if everything is ephemeral, the person looking must also be ephemeral. And that's a deep, deep insight that begins to break away from the fixed belief systems and things that perhaps hold us back from directly experiencing our lives.
But
To
all of
see
that is
that maybe,
But all
to
of that
see
is
that there's
transcended. You
maybe,
see.
to see that there's maybe not what we thought, including ourselves, can be a way to begin to be in the state that the seeker wants to be in when he sees John.
But
So
all of that
but
is
that happens through looking.
yeah, yes, I understand. But all of that is just mind stuff, isn't it? I mean, all of those ideas are transcended. You see, the meditator as an ego is as an ego, sorry, decides to meditate, but then the meditator disappears. That's the whole point. The meditator disappears, and there is just the goal
Is
samadhi. But looking, you see, so much of what I see in non-duality is actually psychology. It's actually psychology. The very mind that we want to transcend is the very instrument we're using to try and understand what we are. You see, it's like the thief who pretends to be a policeman in order to catch the thief. You see,
well, that's your
the mind.
perspective. That's not the perspective of
Of
other
course, it's my
people.
perspective. It can't be
Yeah,
anybody else's perspective, because I only
that's
speak for
right. So
myself.
you
But
can't assume that perspective on anyone else.
but yes, but it's my view, and we're here to share views. So that's my view.
So
But
can I comment then, Tony?
yeah, sure.
I'd like to open it up to other areas
course.
of discussion too, just because we're all kind of have our own individual understanding and expression, etc. One of the points that I think is useful perhaps to explore, it has been for me, is the mind, the brain, the physical organ. And what is belief? What is belief? What is how does the mind function in such a way as to render something that we think is believable? And maybe just take this moment, as John might say, and take a look, pop the hood. What beliefs are there? What do we feel we know about it?
If I could just say something, James,
John, please.
that
Sure.
if you take something like what we believe to be true, there's a whole host of ways that could be explored, and countless books have been written about ways that we can, even in a classical psychological sense, but also in a spiritual inquiry kind of sense, in terms of looking at belief and deconstructing belief and transcending belief and seeing through the limitations of belief and on and on. And I have a very specific approach to that just comes out of whatever my own intuitions, whether it's obviously not the only way. And that approach is, as we were doing at the outset, forget about the beliefs and whether they're true or not. Just look at your experience. And your experience, even if there's an overlay of belief and idea and concepts about what is happening right now experientially, and that probably will be there. It's spontaneously being generated, it would seem, by consciousness, these interpretations. You can look
John,
at
when
experience, you can look at experience itself and discover by looking at experience that none of the beliefs hold up under scrutiny.
Well, who is
not
looking?
by refuting the beliefs conceptually.
Yes,
but by
who is
looking
looking at the experience? You're popping the hood and you're looking at your experience. Who is looking at the experience?
Who is looking at experience? Who is having this
Who is looking?
conversation?
Who is looking
no
at your
answer to that.
experience?
There's no answer to that question, of course, because the inquiry that I'm inviting into of there being someone who is having experience, for example, is an idea, is a concept, and that can also be discovered to be a very tiny, tiny part of the actual story of what's transpiring here, because what's transpiring here transcends every idea we have about it. Idea of a self, idea of a world.
Going back to sorry, I have to get used to names here. Who was just talking before you, John?
Oh,
James.
James. No, not James.
Philo.
James, wait. I think I
no,
was.
not Philo. Ah, you were. Sorry. Yes. Okay, James. James.
Right.
James, you said you were talking about understanding the mind. Yes, you were talking about understanding the mind, the brain. But isn't mind just a thought? You see, it's just one thought following another, isn't it? One thought comes, another thought. There's no doership behind it. There's just a thought arrives, and another thought arrives, and it disappears, appears, and disappears. That's all that mind is.
That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. But we can look.
That's what it's experienced as. Yeah.
Well, it depends.
Go on.
Let's look at the brain and its automatic impersonal mechanisms. For example, if I say the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, the brain automatically starts imagining, where's the most beautiful thing I've ever, and it pops out examples, right? That's a machine. That's not you. Do you consciously search for that beautiful thing, or does it seem to just come
No, you can't see the brain, James.
Well, no,
You're
please,
assuming you
please,
understand something about the
please,
machine, right?
please,
But
I
it's
know
just
a lot about what I'm talking about. I know a great deal of what I'm talking about.
okay, go
So
on.
please be patient with me,
Mm-hmm.
okay? The problem isn't that the brain makes images or feelings in the body, which it does, in response or reaction to something that happens. And it's automatic, it's impersonal, and it always happens. Content asserts itself automatically, always.
Yes, I
Okay?
agree.
I'm not doing that.
Agreed.
Okay. So why should I identify with it as if I am? Isn't that the
Well,
same thing? Wait,
do
isn't
you or
that
don't you?
wait, isn't that the same as believing something? There's no believer, there's no identifier.
From whose perspective?
There is no one to have a perspective.
Well, if you go out onto the street and just ask the first stranger
Let's
that you
just
come
look right
across,
now. No, please. No examples. Look right now in your own immediate experience. That's the only way to know for sure. And we have to keep at it consciously. We have to keep at it. Otherwise, we fall back into subject, object, reaction, identification, and so on, as if it's normal. It's insane. So let's be realistic. The machine and identification as part of the machine is not volitional. It's automatic. As soon as I can see clearly the automatic part and how it's not me doing it, the whole system breaks down.
I'd love to just open it up and allow other people to
absolutely.
ask questions, explore. You know, I opened up with an inquiry.
Yes.
And it was purposeful, you know, it was an invitation for people to look at their experience and discover something about it. Not that we necessarily have to stay on that track, but it could be useful to come back to that potentially, or just to open it up to other people to see what is on their minds and what they might like to explore. So thanks, guys. Appreciate
Can I
it.
jump in, John?
Yeah, please, Debbie.
Yeah, because it's kind of like going back to Tony's initial question, but I'm not gonna stick there. When I first started exploring with you, I too, and I wouldn't consider myself a seeker at the time necessarily, but I wanted this practice thing. I wanted some delineated, you need to do this after 40 years of Zen practice with teachers. I was always given an outline of what I was supposed to be doing. And this was very open. But what I've learned through this experience is it helped me, as James was bringing out, to see that what I really wanted was something to cling on to. I was grasping again for a format. Give me a way to do
Structure,
this. Yeah. Exactly. And what week after week being with you and taking some of the book classes, what I've come to finally experience is just being with that experience, being right here, right now, open to what is, and actually can see phenomena can arise without me putting a label on it, a concept around it, a frame around it, a frame of reference. I can walk in the morning and just walk and see wonderful phenomena all around me without the mind having to grasp and engage. I don't have to continually engage and find, in fact, sometimes I'm finding it laughable that I think I thought I knew what I knew. I'm seeing you've shaken loose so many of my certainties by just being able to be present in my experience without having, because all of my concepts just dim down the shine, dull the shine.
Well, as I often say, Debbie, the conceptualizing apparatus of life, of consciousness, whatever that is, it's a miracle and a mystery how that even operates. One way I describe it is it's like the consciousness or life itself is taking this absolute transcendental infinity and attempting to collapse it into something definable and knowable. And this is an amazing thing. I mean, this is the essence of, what I'm sharing and we were exploring at the outset, that when you look, you can begin to appreciate, and that appreciation kind of to Tony's point, it tends to kind of grow over time where we see more and more clearly, more and more convincingly that this is self-transcendent, not because of something I'm doing, but because its very nature is, in its infinite, endless, boundless nature, it's not collapsible. It never actually collapses into anything, even though it seems like it does. It seems like it collapses into our definitions and descriptions. But look, and you can see right now that this moment is not collapsed into anything. It's transcends that. It's beyond that. It is absolutely, and feel it. Feel how unfathomable it actually is. How it never resolves as being something. Because the minute the conceiving mind imagines it has resolved what it is, it's no longer.
Chokes the aliveness out of it.
It doesn't really, but it seems like it does.
Well, yeah, okay, it appears to me that's
it appears that it does, but it's powerful to see that it never collapses.
Well, it can never collapse. Right.
It's unbreakably transcendental. It's unbreakably infinite. It's unbreakably itself. It never leaves itself. It never departs from itself. It never becomes something other than itself. But the conceiving mind can make it appear as if it does, and not to make the conceiving mind in any kind of boogeyman, because it's not.
Right.
Because that's part of its dance.
It's
to appear as things. It appears as Debbie, and it appears as me, and it appears as everyone on the call, and it appears as all the phenomena that we think of as phenomena. But emphasis on appears, because when we look again, we can see that it never actually becomes what it appears to become. It always remains itself. It always remains this inconceivable, whatever you want to call it, life, reality, God, transcendence. I don't know. There's no word for it. It remains itself. And we can't say what that is, but it's what we are fundamentally.
Yeah, and I think the important part too is knowing that we can't say what it is, for me at least. The
It's profound.
uncertainty.
It's truly profound to see that. It's truly profound to see that it's impossible to put this into any of our conceptual frames of reference.
I think that's what I wanted to say, John, and just to point out, because the mind, as I have come to know my own mind, so to speak, is binary. It sorts and contrasts, compares and contrasts. It's the very source of duality. There's no duality in reality. There's only duality in the way this mind and its beliefs, I'll say, project. Right, wrong, good, bad, I'm right, you're wrong. All of the beliefs, big and small, that shape our experience. And I just wanted to point that out, because for me, that was a profound recognition by watching my own mind. And I'm watching it all the time, actually. That's what I say. Awareness is watching the mind for purposes of delineation. I know that they're all the same, and I recognize that. In fact, that's been a growing recognition, a dawning recognition, because for many years I did separate awareness from experience. And in such a form as I would say, awareness is that which knows experience. That helps. I mean, that gave me some clarity of what is awareness as distinct from, and it did clarify for a period of time. And then just in the last while, maybe there's that merging and coalescing, or not coalescing, dissolving of all discriminating context. That said, I just wanted to point out that for me, the work or the recognition of how belief and minds project what we think is reality, because we all think we know reality, and indeed we don't. We can't. There's no conceptual way to render or to believe that we know reality. So we have to find our own way, each of us, all 30 or so. By the way, I'm just delighted to see 30, not even faces, but 30 folks that are keen enough to be here and interested. So we've got another 25 minutes, more or less, although it's not, we can go on if it feels good and right and all that. And please, any others, you don't have to raise your hand, turn your mute off and speak up. If you have any thoughts, questions, concerns, I encourage you to do so at this moment. Bob, I see you. Were you indicating you wanted to speak?
No, not right this moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, you can't move your hand and I get you.
Yeah.
But we actually don't see the movements often. I don't. So does anybody have any comment they'd like to make at this moment?
I would just like to say that we see things, and then there can be a tendency to hold on to what we've seen, and that can then form a belief. And it's very subtle and happens very quickly. And so if there's a prescription, which I don't really think there is, but if there is one, it would be to be continually letting or continually seeing these things come and go. And if you look at the world itself, it is doing that. If you look at phenomena, that's exactly what it's doing. Is what John was pointing to right at the beginning. Everything is continuously disappearing. And in that disappearance is liberation. And that's how we can think about our beliefs. They can arise and then they can disappear. And in that disappearance, they're liberated and they're gone. And that would solve a whole lot of conflict issues that we have. Because when we hold on to these beliefs and then someone comes with a different belief, then there's conflict.
Perhaps we could move into another rather nefarious area of aware living, and I'll call it love. Can we talk about love, or can we enter into it, not talk about it? Can we recognize I'll say all there is love, to use a word, and I cannot in some way relate to that love as a feeling or an emotion or any of that, although it's all in there.
What do you mean by the word? You're using that word, and interested in exploring it. Do you have, it's a word obviously that means a lot of different things in the English language, but in the case of how you're using it, what do you see it as a meaning, or in what way do you see it as an entry point into this exploration of reality?
I have to use other words.
That's fine. Yeah.
And we're exploring it, and it's live in the sense that that's all there is just this moment. So you could say, love is an act. It's not an idea. It's not passive. It is a movement. Its essence is creation, is life itself. It's beneficent. That is, love is in the act of loving. It's a movement of great beauty, truth, joy. It's an interesting focusing, but I don't mean to focus because it's more an expanding into everything. In other words, love is what is writ large without exception. It's all inclusive. Kind of like the sun as the metaphor of the sun giving and giving and giving. It just gives of itself, by itself, through itself. For me, as it's my poetic nature, it strikes the poetic side of my, and the writer part of my life and my affections. It's beyond affection. It's beyond the human conditioned ideas of love. It's a
Can I jump in?
yes, please.
It's Colombe.
Hi, Cologne.
Hi, James. I really love what you just said because I have that poetic seeds in me, I think. And since I've been, coming here a few times, some of you know that I really, I learn a lot with nature and just being there. And it's funny because when I'm deep in nature, there's no duality inside of me. There is none. I don't experience duality. And I have a mantra. My mantra is always, Colombe, get out of the way. Because my way is my mind. And in my mind, like somebody said, there's dualities here. It's not what I see. It's right here. And for me, experiencing love. Today, we need the word love to explain things. But I realize that when I'm in love, when I'm in nature, the word does not exist. That's only an experience that I cannot explain, even write. But there's something bigger than, much bigger than. And today, I don't try anymore to label it, to name it. And it's an experience. This morning I was deep in nature and suddenly we have to pack up. And in packing up, I start going through all those, movement of the mind, coming back to civilization. And I experience anxiety, but anxiety for me I was in my duality. I had to let go of the moment of that and getting into other things. And I came home and I thought, oh, I'm gonna have time to sit with my people from British Columbia and all over the world. And at the same time, there was a part of me said, oh, I have to do this and that. But there's something that grabbed me and sat me down. And a part of me say, listen. And I was listening to some of you, and sometimes it could be very complex for me. But when, like Debbie said, that I just get in the experience, my experience, not yours, mine, something happened. But that thing that happened, I cannot explain. And for me today, it's okay that I can't label it, but I know deep inside of me that there's something inside of me who knows, and that's all. So I like the poetic, I like where nature brings me and everything in nature. And I just want to share something with you. This week I was driving my car and suddenly I look at my rear mirror and there was a spider over there, was, doing his web. And I said, my God, she's gonna be shook up when I'm gonna be on the highway. And I drove in the highway and looked at my rear mirror, and that little spider was going and hiding between the mirror and the block. And when I stopped, she was still doing her web. And for me, being able to observe that, sometimes I say, that spider is like me. It could be like me. Anyway, for me, nature is such a master, a great, great master to take me back to, I think that I don't want, the word is the essence, the non-duality. I just wanted to share that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colombe.
It's not necessarily a word that I use very often in the context of what I talk about and share. But there are times when one way I describe it is that this sense of, if you just feel the sense of being right now, the sense of just existence, which is what we're feeling, sense of life. And notice that anything and everything that's being experienced in its essence is its isness, its life, its beingness. Just feel the aliveness of everything. The singularity of everything, its aliveness, its being. And as you feel that, I mean, one sense, it's ultimately transcends anything we could conceive of it to be. But in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about that transcendental emptiness. In other words, it has no identity. It's essenceless. It feels that it has these almost like primal kinds of qualities, even though it's ultimately beyond all the qualities. And one of the primal qualities is this vitality, this aliveness. It's shocking aliveness. It's Shakti. It's energy. It's primal. You feel the primal energy of everything. There's another primal quality that's just, I'll just share these as they kind of come to mind and come to my sense of this, is it's just absolute openness. There's nothing blocking anything else because there's just one thing here, one existence. You could say that openness is another kind of primal quality. You can feel that absolute openness. There's no opposite to the openness. There's no closed because there's no doors, there's no barriers, no boundaries. There's also this quality in that primal aliveness of its life. It's like this nourishing flow, it's life, it's life-giving, isn't it? The moment is springing forth. That's its nourishing, life-giving It's the lifeblood of everything, isn't it? And everything, that's what we're experiencing right now, that nourishing flow of reality. And something in that vitality, in that nourishing, that, in a sense, absolute openness to everything because it is everything, we could call that love. We could call that nourishing, never-ending flow of pure openness and aliveness, the embrace of everything, because there's no separation anywhere. We could call that love.
Beautiful, John. Yes. Thank you.
Would you use the
Hi,
word
Peter.
acceptance? Hi, John. Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Peter.
The word I'm thinking of is acceptance. I would say on a personal level, love is accepting of everything that is, and on a universal level, that's already happening.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
you said in some of your, like you said in your some of your talks, that it's acceptance, love is already there, and any me doing it is downriver from the actual, the acceptance that's happening.
Exactly. Like this is already, you know, the ocean of existence, right? It doesn't accept the waves that are arising. It is the waves. Like, so everything from that perspective of this one reality, this single reality that is here as everything, we could use the word acceptance, the embrace, the welcoming of what is. It's just the absolute, like everything, each moment, you know, even the moments of that we might describe as disturbing or uncomfortable are its emanation, its expression, its welcoming, its radical allowing of everything to be as it is. Yeah, we could say that's a kind of love in a sense. It's ultimately obviously beyond words, but you know, at a certain point, you were mentioning poetry, you know, and you know, in one way, we're kind of left with poetry at a certain point to try to capture the uncapturable nature of this, because it is just utterly beyond, right? I mean, it's incredible to take any word, you know, to describe any aspect of experience, including love, but you know, love's a big word, pointing to a big array of human phenomena, but you know, any experience we might have, and this is an incredible kind of inquiry or investigation that, you know, I so love and love sharing with others, is you know, take any label that has been applied to what's here experientially, and then explore the actual experience, and you just find this endless richness and detail, and the details are made of more details, and you never, ever, ever get to the end of that. You just find more and more and more and more and more. That's the infinity of what's here. And that's one, the other reason why, central reason why this won't be collapsed, even though we imagine it can be collapsed into our ideas. There's just too much, there's too much information here. It's too vast. It's too endless and infinite in its detail, it would seem. But there's a richness there awaiting our discovery just by looking at our experience and realizing it is endless. It is fathomless. All of it. From the most seemingly mundane and quote unquote our everyday normalcy, just sitting here on the Zoom call is absolute reality. It's infinity, isn't it? Every little part of it, every little sensation, every little rumble of thought, every little subtle feeling, vibe, energy, all of it. Explore any of those and you arrive at the same infinity, don't you?
And don't we just love it?
Sometimes we can't stand it, but but then in those moments when it feels like, God, this is rough. These are rough waters that I'm traversing. Then there is that opportunity to look at what those rough waters are made of and discover, wow, the infinity's there too. That looks like a rough go of it right now. That's also the infinity. Clearly it is. It's life. It's the miracle of existence that can look pretty fucking gritty sometimes.
Yeah.
Pardon my
Yes,
French.
I had a friend who every time I was going through peril, and that she would turn to me and say, and don't you just love it? And she would smile, you know, and it's there. It's just extremely subtle. The love that we think we know at the gross level of feelings and wounds and hurts and pains and all of that kind of icky stuff, human stuff. It's part of our human experience, but my goodness, the subtle is immense and vast and unending, as you say, John. There's no beginning and there's no ending. That's a wonderful recognition that whatever it is we are, however we word it, it's infinite. It's infinity itself.
Yeah, and as Tony was sort of reminding us about, you know, that sometimes in these investigations we can, without even realizing, and imagine somehow we're some observer doing the noticing and doing the inquiry and doing the discovery of this infinity, and sometimes losing sight of, yeah, no, actually that thing you're discovering about the boundless, fathomless, endless, infinite nature of all the phenomena is exactly what you are, exactly what the apparent observer is as well, is that same boundless, fathomless infinity. Just everywhere, that's all you find. So there's not someone standing outside of this infinity looking at it. It's not like that.
Yes, it's like the answer to the question, well, who is looking, is everything. Everything is looking. There's no
Indeed.
singular one looking. Everything is looking.
Mm-hmm.
The entire oneness, the entire being.
And one of the recognitions from that is it just happened to appear after I had some more deeper recognition. Fear totally disappeared. I don't mean instinctive, alarm or something like that when you think a car is crossing the line and you're driving or something. That kind of instinctive fear remains necessarily in the body, in the cells, but I'm talking about psychological fears. And with the disappearance of fear goes any fear of death. One resides in, I'll say, their own infinity. John, you can wordsmith it better than me, probably, but
I mean, my own experience of this stuff is that the individual, and in this case, his experience, doesn't go away. It isn't gone. It isn't. It's still there operating. Like that's I can access that as a perspective and feel what that's like, and do oftentimes have that experience of being an individual. But that's not the only perspective that's available to us, but as an individual, sure, things like fear can still occur, and feeling anxious about things can still occur, and feeling upset about things can still occur, and feeling grief about loss can still occur. And in my experience, that's part of life's dance, it would seem, at least here. But it's very, very different, when your friend was saying, like when things are difficult, can that be enjoyed? And, from the perspective of, as Father was saying, what's having the experience is ultimately everything, not merely an individual. So it's very paradoxical. It's like, well, I'm having this experience right now. I'm talking to you. John, the individual, is not the same as James, the individual. Like there's that's there, as a available vantage point on reality. that reality is creating that, because reality creates everything. But reality can also wake up to a different perspective, which is actually what's also here is infinite absolute reality experiencing itself, like literally, because that collapse into the apparent individual is not the whole story, is it? It's not the whole story. Because when I go to look for John as an individual, I both can find it, but I can't find it at the same time, because I just find wide open experiencing, endless, vast experiencing with no boundary or border. It's very interesting to be both very personal and very human, and at the same time absolutely transhuman and transpersonal simultaneously. It's wild.
Simultaneously. Yes, simultaneously. That's
my experience, at least. But
yeah, that's my experience too. It's profound in every dimension. In the human experience, senses, tasting, touching, feeling are profound in the context of not being limited to that. And a whole complexion changes, like those things you used to shake and they'd make a different pattern. Life is constantly
kaleidoscope, yeah.
Kaleidoscope, yes.
I love that. It's a wonderful metaphor for like turning the perspective, you know, and like suddenly it's like there I am, and then suddenly there I am gone. Or there's that moment of fear, and then I turn the kaleidoscope and it's like it's space-like and empty at the same time as it's there, you know. Yeah. It's that wonderful metaphor that I use a lot. And I first heard it in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of the rainbow, you know, because the rainbow vividly appears like it's really something substantial. Like there it is, the beautiful rainbow. But then when you go to find what the rainbow is, you come up empty-handed, don't you? It's space-like. So well, which one is it? Is it nothing or is it something? You can't say. You can't say. It's so beautiful in being, in a sense, both of those things, but beyond both of those things. You know, to that point about being an individual and not, I was just to share a little tidbit from a really wonderful friend and mentor of mine who passed away a couple years, Peter Brown. Some of you know his work. And somebody asked Peter, I've told this story before, well, what's it like? He talked about his work as the yoga of radiant presence, and somebody asked him, well, what's it like for you to experience the radiance, you know? And Peter said, well, you know, I'm Peter Brown, this fucked up, neurotic, messed up guy, and I'm the creator of the universe. Interesting, huh? Yeah.
James, you were talking about love, presumably unconditional love. You know, there's this beautiful word, ananda, which can translate into a lot of different flavors and attributes. So just something I wanted to say about love. Love is a natural expression that comes from being connected to that primordial being. This word ananda, I mean, Vedanta says that your true nature is sat chit ananda, you know, consciousness, existence, consciousness, bliss. So this word ananda is normally translated as bliss, but it means so many different things which are essentially all the same. So love, joy, self-fulfillment, peace, bliss, contentedness, all of those things are just different kind of flavors of ice cream, if you like, which emanate from and expressed from being itself. And it permeates experience. You see, you probably heard this expression about seeing God in everything. That just means that this unconditional love and joy and contentedness permeates the changing experiences that we have. It mixes in with that. maybe Shakti is a better word of a better way of describing it. But unconditional love is, you were talking about it being directed. I would say that it's directed but choicelessly, because it just naturally radiates from pure being. So it's not being directed as such, although it is being directed, but without any purpose as such. It just permeates everything that we experience. To me, awareness and love are synonymous. They're really the same thing. They're just different attributes of that one expression of being.
Yeah, that's very nice, Tony. And
Yeah.
the way that I'm seeing it is that that there's no movement in it. Paradoxically, it's like because it's infinite. So it's everywhere and everything. And yet
it's everywhere. It's everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
Well, I don't subscribe to nowhere. I don't subscribe to negation. So I would just
these paradoxes are beautiful, though, aren't they? Aren't these paradoxes beautiful? See,
but
emptiness
what I
and
wanted
fullness.
to say was that it appears to move, and yet it's unmoving. It's both.
Yeah, both. That's the paradox, and we need to get comfortable with it, because that's what we are. I mean, that's our experience, is you could say, of paradox. Not the mind's experiences of contradiction, but our immediate aware experience is of paradox, to put it in words, perhaps. John, would you like to close with some statement or anything along any line that you feel?
No, I loved I loved what Tony was sharing about that kind of indiscriminate. The image that came to my mind as he was saying that was the sun. It just radiates. It doesn't decide I'm going to shine over here and not shine there. You could say it's purposeless in that sense, but it's also just its nature is to just shine, and yeah, and we can feel that this is the shine of this moment, right? Its nature is just to radiate. It's shining, isn't it? No matter how it's appearing, that's its shining, and it's always shining, no matter what it looks like. That's its radiance.
That's where we start, and that's where we end up. Not that we end.
It's the great good news that it always is what is. It's always the shining of reality.
Always the shining.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm a little bit overwhelmed with the number of people. John, I think it's something to do with you. Your magnetism,
well, some of the lovely folks who hang out in my Zoom meetings were here today. So
yes, I'm sure. And thank you all for coming. And we will be taking a little break for August, and then we'll be continuing with cafes through to the end of the year, it seems. Certainly we're booked through to the end of October right now for guests, and maybe John will consent to come back again in the new series. Thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me, James, and lovely to be with all of you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, all of you, for coming and chiming in where you did. It was all very helpful, I think, and lively, which I liked.
Lively, dynamic. Life itself.
Life itself.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.